Jerome Powell, the Federal Reserve Chair, he just made a $2.5 billion mistake. While Americans struggle with 20-year high interest rates, the Fed chair is burning billions on a palace renovation. And Trump's had enough, saying he's a moron. That's what the president said. Too late, Powell. Always too late. Now Trump's economic team has found their smoking gun for removal. Massive waste, economic sabotage, and political games. Remember when Powell slashed rates 50 points right before the election with zero justification? Well, now inflation's at a 4-year low, but he won't budge. The fix was in. The Federal Reserve thinks it's untouchable, above the presidency, beyond accountability. Well, they're about to learn different. Trump is setting the stage to do what no president has dared. Fire the Fed chair. And the countdown has begun. While Powell destroys your purchasing power with reckless monetary policy, smart Americans are teaching their kids the truth about economics. The Tuttle Twins magazine explains what the Fed doesn't want you to know: how money printing creates inflation, why central banking hurts families, and why real free markets, what they look like. Their monthly magazine breaks down complex economic concepts through engaging comments and activities kids actually enjoy. Our subscription, we just got our new one in the mail. I love it. And while schools push modern monetary theory nonsense, give your children real fiscal literacy. Subscribe. It's only pennies. For a whole year, $56. That's it. I mean, those dollars are going to plant seeds in your grandkids, your nieces, your nephews, your children, in their minds that are going to bear fruit. They're going to sprout trees of liberty for their entire lives. TuttleTwins.com/next. That's less than $5 a month to ensure your kids understand money better than the Fed chair himself. TuttleTwins.com/next. Make it happen. All right, so just finding this out. Steve Gruber posting this 10 hours ago that Trump certainly can fire the Fed chair, Jerome Powell, if there is cause. And yes, I believe we have found the cause. The Trump administration has zeroed in on the Fed's $2.5 billion renovation project as possible cause for removing Powell. Now, last week we told you that there was a letter that was issued from the Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac people stating that Powell is going to resign. Well, maybe he'll resign to save face rather than say, hear President Trump go, "You're fired," right? That's what we all want to hear. But let's listen in what's going on here.
Well, the Fed chair, the administration's been highly about Jerome Powell, the Fed chair. The administration's been highly critical of the way the Fed has handled renovations to its building, to its headquarters here in Washington. $2.5 billion renovation sounds like a lot to me, I have to admit. Yeah. But let me ask you, could this be used as a predicate to fire the Fed chair?
I think that whether the president decides to push down that road or not is going to depend a lot on the answers that we get to the questions that Russ Vought sent to the Fed. The bottom line is that this is the most expensive project in D.C. history, $2.5 billion with a $700 billion cost overrun. To put that in perspective, the cost overrun for this Federal Reserve project is about the same size as the second biggest building overhaul in American history, which was the FBI building. And so the Fed has a lot to answer for. And the bottom line is that the key statutory problem in 1913, when we founded the Fed, the U.S. was under a gold standard. So it was never envisioned by the people that voted for the construction of the Fed that we currently see, that the Fed could print money and toss it around willy-nilly because they had to have the gold to do what they're doing. And they're unbounded right now.
Right, literally print the money to do the renovation. Very quickly, yes or no answer, does the president, in your view, have the authority to fire the Fed chair?
That's a thing that's being looked into, but certainly if there's cause, he does.
Okay, thank you very much, Kevin Hassett. Really appreciate it.
Certainly if there's cause, he does. Oh, my friends, and there is cause. Okay, let's find out. Let's get a little bit more. Let's get a little bit deeper here. Fed Chair James Fishback, 21 hours ago at the Student Action Summit. Fed Chair Jerome Powell is a traitor. That's the only way to put it.
Fascinating stat. So Jerome Powell he's a Trump hater. That's just the only way to put it. He's an absolute Trump hater. Not just him, but the entire organization, Bo, is infected with Trump derangement syndrome. Here's a fascinating stat. In the 2020 election, for every dollar Fed employees donated, 97 cents went to Democratic candidates or causes. For every one Republican economist at the Fed, there are 10 Democrat economists. The entire institution is being overtaken by progressives who are just being dishonest about the president's agenda. One way to look at this is Powell gave a speech in April in Chicago, and he rightly highlighted there are 4 elements to the president's economic agenda: trade, fiscal, deregulatory, and energy. Powell proceeded to only talk about one of them, which is trade. And so forget how he feels about Trump for a moment. He is, in a dishonest way, cherry-picking the president's agenda, only focusing on tariffs and panicking over the inflation impact they've yet to have, they won't have, but he thinks they'll have. And as a result, he's keeping rates near 20-year highs. Now, why do we care about that as Americans? Because if you're a family and you want to start a family or grow your family, you can't do that if you can't buy a home. You can't buy a home because mortgage rates are at 7%. Mortgage rates are at 7% because Powell can't get off his high horse, look at the economic data that there is, and say, wait, if inflation's at a 4-year low, we've had 3 back-to-back-to-back better than expected, lower than expected inflation readings, why can't we lower rates again? Why exactly? When you lowered them right before the election by 50 points to help Kamala Harris, but you won't do them now even though inflation's lower. None of it makes sense. The president is right to be frustrated. So Jerome Powell...
Oh, without question. Let's see what the president had to say.
The Fed. $1 billion rebuilding the Fed, the Federal Reserve building. And I don't know what he knows about building, but you talk about cost overrun. So he got this approved, and he started the work during the Biden administration. And he doesn't look like the kind of a guy, frankly, that wants to spend $2.5 billion. And it's very interesting because out of 71 economists, one person, me, and then one other person, I think from Wharton, got it right. And the others are all wrong in terms of the success of our country this quickly. We have no inflation. We have cash pouring in. It was me and somebody else. Then I can tell you, I don't need 5,000 people working for me behind the scenes like Jerome Powell to tell him what he should say once a month. Because they got it wrong. The Fed got it wrong. I call him too late. He's always too late. Every point cost us $360 billion. Think of that. And we should be 3 points. That's almost $1 trillion. Approximately $1 trillion less we should be just with the signing of a piece of paper. So we'll see what happens. I mean, you're telling me he's going to quit. I hope he quits. I don't know if he's going to quit, but he should quit.
He should quit, or maybe he should just get fired. Fire him, Trump. Here we have National Economic Advisor, National Economic Council Director Kevin Hassett talking about the Federal Reserve when it was created.
Out of bill. The bottom line is, from my perspective, that when the Federal Reserve was created, we were under a gold standard. And the idea that the Fed could print money and then spend $2.5 billion on a building without real congressional oversight, it didn't occur to the people that framed the Federal Reserve Act. And so I think that we've got a real problem of oversight and excess spending. And to put it in perspective, the cost overrun right now is $700 million. The second biggest renovation of a building that we've ever had in D.C. was the Federal Reserve building. I mean, the FBI building. The FBI building, the whole thing costs about the same as this cost overrun at the Fed. And so I think that we definitely need to rethink the way the Fed's acting. We 100% want independent monetary policy, but it sure looks like they need more congressional oversight on things like the way they build their buildings.
How about just end the Fed? Can we just do that? How about that? Here's more from James Fishback. Trump read about Powell. Inflation has hit a 4-year low and is heading even lower. So why is Jerome Powell too late, keeping interest rates near 20-year highs?
Deregulation policy. Inflation's at a 4-year low. As you heard Jay Powell say yesterday, there were 3 consecutive back-to-back-to-back better than expected inflation readings. And let's not forget President Trump's fiscal policy, energy policy, and deregulation policy all point to continued lower inflation. And so ultimately, the question has to be asked, why is too late making too many excuses? Why is he keeping rates this high when the economic fundamentals do not call for it?
It's because he's politicizing it. Here's President Trump on Air Force One a little while ago.
No inflation. Our country is strong. Our interest rate should be 3 points lower. If our interest rate was 3 points lower, that's almost $1 trillion in cost. And it's done just by the signing of a pen. But we have a moron at the head of the Fed. He's a moron.
Speaking of Jay Powell, do you have a top choice?
I do. I have 2 or 3 top choices. Actually. No. You almost got me there.
How about can we put Ron Paul at the head of the Fed? That's what I'd like to see. Okay, so Citizens Free Press posted this 5 hours ago. Maria Bartiromo. Outstanding opening question about the next chairman of the Federal Reserve.
The Jay Powell.
Joining me now in this Sunday Morning Futures exclusive is Kevin Warsh, who served as a member of the Federal Reserve Board of Governors from 2006 to 2011. It's great to see you, Kevin.
Great to be with you, Maria.
Thank you so much for being here. You know, President Trump has been trying to get Jay Powell to cut rates for a long time. We all know what we're talking about. $36+ trillion in debt. $9 trillion in debt that is turning over this year. Wouldn't it be part of the Fed's thinking to say, okay, we're spending more money on interest just to hold that debt than we do on defense spending? I understand the Fed has a mandate, but should you become the chairman of the Fed, is this something that you would be thinking about in terms of lowering rates being a positive for the president dealing with the nation's debt?
So the president's right to be frustrated with the Jay Powell and the Federal Reserve. Inflation comes when the government spends too much. That's the spending you're talking about, and prints too much. The government's done just that thing over the last 4 or 5 years. The government needs to put its fiscal house in order and its monetary house in order. The president took a good shot at putting the fiscal house in order through this tax bill. We're going to grow a lot more than the Congressional Budget Office says. The U.S. is on the cusp of, I think, a radical improvement in our productive capacity. The tax bill is part of it. Deregulatory policy is part of it. Spend reductions are part of it. And the Fed needs to get on board.
I mean, look, President Trump is doing his part. I mean, a lot of hysteria over his tariffs, and yet look what just happened. The tariffs actually brought in $27 billion for the month, customs duties. You're talking about $100 billion on an annualized basis for tariffs, and we have a budget surplus for the month of June. Should the Federal Reserve be cutting interest rates right now?
So in a word, yes. Maria, it's quite simple. Why is it that money and financial conditions are so loose on Wall Street and considerably tighter on Main Street? Because the Fed has the policy mix exactly wrong. It has a big balance sheet like we're in the 2008 crisis or the 2020 pandemic, and has rates that are too high. It needs to shrink the Fed balance sheet and cut interest rates. In so doing, Main Street can get a much lower cost of credit. First-time home buyers can find their way into houses, and the policy mix would be right. I don't know if I'm just saying that because I grew up 200 miles from here in a sort of place far from the bright lights in big city. But Main Street needs to get its break, and it's high time they do it, and the Fed can be part of that.
Now,
let's go. Time to fire that guy, Jerome Powell. Fire him on his ass. If you have value from this report, tap subscribe. My final thought is next. So what it is, it's economic warfare against the American people, and Powell's the general leading the charge. He tanks the economy with high rates while blowing billions on Federal Reserve palace renovations. He cuts rates to influence elections and claims he can't cut them now when we actually need it. James Fishback nailed it. Powell hates Trump, and that's it. But here's what changes everything. Trump found the constitutional leverage. That $2.5 billion boondoggle isn't just waste, it's cause for removal. When the Fed was created under the gold standard, they couldn't just print money for marble lobbies. Now they act like monetary kings, untouchable and unaccountable. Trump's message is clear. Your reign is over. The Federal Reserve will answer to the American people, or its chairman will answer to unemployment. Powell's playing chicken with the wrong president. So here's my question. Should Trump just fire Powell immediately or wait for more economic damage to build the case? Answer below. And grab your next news gear in our merch shop, Alligator Alcatraz, President Otto Pen, and you can select from any member of the administration in our American Badass series and show your support for America First policies and trigger a liberal at the same time by going to shop.nextnewsnetwork.com. You'll find it linked down below.